We are live streaming and I just unmuted this, so just as you can tell, such a person, we jumped immediately into this. But John is the chair and so that.
I guess we'll call the meeting to order. We have a couple of guests today. I guess we can go around and introduce ourselves.
Sure, Brian Slack, Ulster County Transportation Council, and the Traffic Safety Coordinator in the Ulster County Traffic Safety.
I'm Kristen Wilson, Marco.
Claudette Ford, member of the board.
Lakeland, Director of Health and Wellness for the City of Kingston.
Stella Salve, Nathan.
So I'm guest here.
Paul Stankus, resident of downtown Kingston.
I'm the environment.
And I'm John Rose Coleman, currently the chair. Maybe some of us have been around for a long time on this, and some are fairly new. So we've got a good mix. To see.
Federal task force.
I was trying to figure out if we want to quickly talk about the safe systems
Yeah, do you want to do that first?
and then do the sidewalk.
I have to leave at 5:05 for childcare.
So we should do the sidewalk.
So it's up to you. I did not have a very robust agenda for sidewalk.
Oh.
But I thought we would start with a discussion. There were some discussions going around on email, and
Yeah.
I know Gustavo and Paul did a little bit of analysis, so maybe we can.
Well, we've got so many bona fide members of the task or the committee here today. I thought maybe we could kind of give an approval to that. I think that we might need some edits, or you think we might want to make edits. I didn't get a chance to look at that. I've been running all day.
I've made some changes to it, just additions to we're talking about the Google Sheet for the sidewalk.
Yeah, the one that Emily sent around.
No, I think we're talking about different.
Wait, what are we talking about?
Are you talking about the Safe Streets for All grant? Or no?
I'm talking about the
Executive order?
executive order
Right.
that, didn't that piece go out to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
And you're talking about, were you talking about that or were you talking?
No,
about
I'm sorry, I was talking about the sidewalk task force, the inventory of best practices, for lack of a better word, which we can get to.
So I did want to, talk about this executive order thing today because we've got almost the whole committee here and that will get us ahead of the deadline.
Since we have limited time, how about I propose I give you all just sort of a call to action? Then we talk about sidewalks, and then after Kristen leaves, if anybody wants to like look at this document and give me specific edits, we do that after.
That works for me.
Sure. So I believe that you've all gotten this Word document as an email attachment. My ask of you today is to review this and give me any edits, preferably in the document. I'd really like to know, not just like philosophically, I think we should talk about this, but I'd really like to know, like, what do you want to say in it? Because I would like to try to encourage the mayor to send this out in next week. Like it said in the email and on the thing, it would make us more competitive for a safe routes for all grant application that the city is preparing. So there's a timeliness to it. The edits that I think I added in there, which is part of this grant, is the grant asks that let's see if I get, the language is either to endorse was Vision Zero or kind of a safe systems approach with a target date to achieve significantly declines, which I haven't talked to the mayor about. I don't know his feelings about it. So I've added that edit because that's one of our grant expectations. That's one of the things that in order for us to check that box, it has to include a date. So I've added that. So that's my ask of you all. Any questions about that, the next steps here?
Just for that last part, you said that that's part of the safe systems to reduce crashes by a certain amount.
So for the Safe Streets for All grant application, in order to check the box, we have to, the municipality must have adopted either a Vision Zero or Safe Systems with a target date to achieve significant declines.
And is it by like a percentage rate or?
I think the municipality can decide what significant declines are and what the date is. So that guidance hasn't been given to us.
It's goal setting.
It's a tough one.
The LRTP and all of our organizations set goals all the time for
Yeah.
and targets. And without a goal, what are we working toward?
Yeah,
So I don't think we're necessarily, I mean,
but just like what,
it's ultimately beyond our control.
yeah,
If you don't set a goal, how do you have any sort of metrics to measure if you're making progress?
Is it,
and what, how do we set that goal? Like, I don't know.
There's no real guidance that I'm aware of.
Okay.
so
So,
somebody decides whether or not they just want to, the goal is a 50% decrease or.
And the mayor may have thoughts on this, like I said, I haven't talked to him about that. But I've added that in here, but if you all had a target date and, a goal, we could suggest that to the mayor for consideration.
the city of New York's goal is 0 deaths. It's Vision Zero goal.
Is a crash a car, or is it
A crash
crash,
is,
any car hitting anything?
Crash could be a bicyclist
Sideways,
hitting
yeah,
a
yeah.
cyclist.
Okay.
Or
I
a
think crash, I
bicyclist
think the
hitting a
cars and
pedestrian.
cars.
So Brian, you said the New York City goal was 0 deaths.
That's correct, yes, Vision Zero is their policy.
So if the goal is 0 deaths, it really doesn't matter as long as nobody dies. You're working towards achieving your goal, whether it be walking, bikes, cars, or whatever.
I believe so.
And I think a side to that was that New York City's rate actually increased.
Yeah, that I feel a little skittish about Vision Zero because I think it does sort of set up that's what I want, right? But it sets up opportunities for failure frequently.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to know, like, what are the crash numbers? I don't know them off the top of my head. And
I think we would
like
need
how
to know
many
what our
crashes?
crash numbers are too.
Do I know them off the top of my
No,
head?
you don't. Come on. But
You against the Vision Zero deaths because of.
I think that it sets up, you just mentioned that in New York City, deaths have gone up since
Right.
they've created Vision Zero.
Right.
And I think it,
But their goal is still 0 deaths, so they're obviously going to do something to get it down to 0.
yeah, I think that it's like for me, it's sort of a marketing issue where it's I don't know, I guess I just sort of see it as an opportunity to quickly fail. It only takes one death, one crash, and you fail.
so are you sort of saying, like, you want an action goal?
I
that can
Do you see what I'm getting there?
I hear what you're saying, but if the goal is still 0 deaths and you had 1, then I would think you would go back and look at what you're doing to get yourself to 0. So I guess, yeah, 1 death is definitely, you believe 0 death though.
Right.
But is the purpose of the grant to say that you failed, or is the purpose of the grant to get you to identify what steps and actions and mitigations you're doing to get to 0?
Could you please
Yeah.
silence that phone?
Yeah, thank you.
I think that I see like a more achievable goal would be to know what our crash rates are now and reducing crash rates to a certain level. Because yes, a death may happen or not, but I when I think about the Broadway project, one of the goals was to reduce crash rates. Somebody may die on Broadway. It very well could happen. for whatever reason
Mhm.
in the coming year. But if we look at the rates, the crash rates 5 years from now, and they have gone down, then we still may have achieved our goal for Broadway of safety, right? So maybe there's one death, because of, who knows what the circumstances could be. But if we have a 50% reduction in car crashes and conflicts, then ultimately the road is safer. I don't know if safer is the right word, but
Yeah, I'd like the,
you see what I'm getting
Yeah,
at?
no, I understand what you're getting at, I'm just trying to figure out which way I'm feeling about.
Yeah,
You
And
know,
the goal should always be zero deaths, but I don't think you're defeating yourself by saying that publicly. We don't want anyone to die in the street if somebody dies.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think people are gonna say, well, you failed, especially if you had a decline in deaths.
If
and
you had
crashes.
the cars 99%.
You know, I mean,
well, from a marketing perspective, and if you just Google like Vision Zero failing, it's,
But it's failing because the rates
great.
are getting higher, not because there was one death.
I mean, it was really just,
And because
you
they
know,
haven't done
the
the
COVID whole thing,
we know
COVID
in
in
New
the
York
city,
City,
like that was
a lot.
in the city because everyone got cars and it was just, everyone was driving like maniacs, it was all this sort of
well,
factors kind of coming together for a perfect storm not long after they established
Yeah,
this.
I just think it's kind of which your philosophy is on this,
Yeah.
And we don't know what the mayor is saying.
Nope.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I think the city, to get back to the focus here, the city has the option. There are several boxes to check that the city must take certain actions in order to apply for the Safe Streets for All grant, one of which is adopting either a Vision Zero policy or a safe systems approach policy. So I think when we think of our recommendations as a board, we can keep that in mind. If you feel that the Vision Zero policy is just not realistic or not prudent, that's a legitimate comment. If there are other additions regarding the goals and metrics, those are the types of analysts that can provide. I'm split on that. I see where you're coming from, but I also know that in other European countries, they do enjoy frequent years without fatalities to pedestrians and cyclists. So it's achievable.
Does the pedestrian master plan, cyclist master plan mentions the safe system?
We've mentioned safe systems and it has some crash data, but I was trying to pull up the data, but I was able to get it quickly.
But does it mention because it encourages, like, favors the safe system approach, or I don't remember.
It doesn't, it says that the city should consider a safe systems approach. That's basically the recommendation.
I'm sorry, what says that?
The pedestrian physical master plan.
The federal government says we have to, right?
I don't know that I can answer that. I don't know.
I think they do.
I think I would consider that if there are more grants that could be requested based on what we decide to endorse, like aim for, I think that to be making that decision. I don't know if that is a factor, but something.
well, let's,
Yeah.
move on for now and then revisit it. I know Christian's got a time constraint.
I think it would just be helpful to know what our crash rates are. to
Yeah,
be able to
and
create a goal.
I wanted to ask
Yeah.
some other questions
Yeah.
in the interest of not losing your knowledge and history and so forth related to the sidewalks. We can revisit that after you meet.
Okay,
Can I ask a quick question before you close this on this topic? Is this gonna be posted? The agenda wasn't posted for today. None of this is up online. This is something you're gonna have to decide on, but you're gonna decide on email. How are you gonna make this transparent as a process?
Thank you for that, Tanya. Yeah, as you said that I did not post it online. That's my apologies. I moved it. Yeah. But the document edits to the commission that is forwardable, the emails that this
20
commission.
days, and you're gonna make it get taking this out within 20 days, right? I don't have the right to get that before 20 days.
Oh, I don't know. Okay, I don't know. But that's the rules as far as I know. I mean,
Right, but
that's-
not, aside from the rules, are you going to be trying to make it a transparent process?
I don't know how else to answer you, so this is the process that we're doing, my apologies, you're right, I goofed it and put it up on the website. I'm sharing it around with the commission, this is an opportunity for the commission to give feedback to the mayor will ultimately decide the executive order. And quite frankly, he could make the order without feedback from the commission, from the
Right,
council,
there's just a
sorry.
lot of stuff being done outside of the open meeting, including most of the conversation.
I hear you, and the chair can comment if you'd like, I
Well,
don't think
this
this
particular
is,
thing is kind of an emergent situation too.
it's got a deadline.
We weren't aware of this deadline until,
Yeah,
what, Monday or something like that.
And what is the deadline?
July 10th is the grant is due, and I
Right.
think we meet the 11th or the 12th again.
Yeah, we meet
That's
there.
sort of the nature of grants, as Kristen and Brian both know, like, the complete streets only meet so many times before that grant application is due. I don't, if the council felt strongly in opposition to this, recommendation, that I think would change, I would suggest that would change the nature of this discussion. But since I think you probably are all supportive of safe systems, I think this is about tweaking that language, it's not, you tell me if you feel differently.
I
Change it.
think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on. I know you had a kind of a game plan about how you wanted to handle this.
Well, so I apologize that it's been a little bit of a nutty month at Repco. We had some whole thing I won't go into, but, so I did not, have an opportunity to review other cities' systems, but I know that Paul stuff.
Yeah, I did, prior to the meeting, I added a few edits to, there's a Google spreadsheet going.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you want to bring up the Google spreadsheet and then perhaps the person who reviewed the specific policy could talk about it, talk about what they found, what their opinions are about it. And I don't know if we would decide today, but I thought perhaps for each one, we could decide, is this even an option for Kingston or not? And if it's not, then we just kind of put it on the back burner. And if there is a policy or program that potentially is an option, bring that to the front burner. That's sort of
So Gustavo brought up something on email about sort of looking at DPW's budget, I think, for the year, the street paving budget, and whether or not we can just kind of use that and sort of maybe not even have to sort of go the whole, at least the way I sort of prefer it, is not having to bring it up for a vote, not having to sort of use outside sort of tax raising, money raising means. I don't know if that was, am I interpreting it correctly?
No, I think, yeah, like that's what I meant. It's like, as a citizen, it's kind of annoying that you see so much money spent in paving. But then why can't they just own that? To me, it's just like a status quo that the cities don't own sidewalks, it's just the resident, but why is that? And why cannot that change? I think to me, like the city, if we want a city that is walkable and doesn't have the issues that we have, I think to me that's basically the only option. I think the one that I read about Rhinebeck has a solution similar to that. It's using local funding to do that. So, I mean, also, they propose a few things that if you go to Rhinebeck, they don't exist yet, so I don't know what happened to that project, maybe it didn't go forward. But to me, that document is like, kind of like towards what I'm thinking.
I agree with you completely. It's been mentioned by attendees, particularly Tanya, in the past. I think if the city does not devote a reasonable amount of resources to the problem, it's not going to get solved. I don't think the city, however, can solve it alone through line item changes to the DPW budget. I think it's far bigger of a problem than that. I think the approach needs to be multifaceted. And that's where I think our spreadsheet can be really helpful if we organize it perhaps with some narrative, which I'm happy to take a shot at. To say this needs to be a multi-tiered approach with increases in budget in not only DPW, but comptroller, buildings and grounds for permitting and inspections, in order to make this really happen over time, if the fee system is not implemented. Because, I mean, let's get back to what the mayor asked us to do. Consider other options. That's really all he asked us to do. We don't have to solve the problem necessarily down to the, very fine grained level. We just need to put out other solutions and organize them. So I think we made a really good step in that direction. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say, I think what you proposed on email today would be another line in our Google document as a potential solution and evaluating whether it's viable or not. I mean, I also agree. And I also see that it's complicated because of the way sidewalks were built into city codes. And that it's the way that sidewalks emerged as opposed to the pavement. They emerged as people put them in front of their own homes, and it was kind of like your sidewalk area, and then they got connected, and they sort of emerged from the private sector as opposed to the pavement area. And so that's kind of written into all of our codes across the nation, where sidewalks are responsibility of the homeowner. And they're owned by the city, but the responsibility of the homeowner is just, it's actually very strange how it all kind of emerged and why they're separate. But I agree, they're part of the public infrastructure and just should be, but we have this history of not doing it that way. So to transition from that is very complicated. And it's also that the streets are, they have CHIPS funding.
I was gonna say that usually.
And there isn't an equivalent, CHIPS funding is funding from the state, so there isn't an equivalent to CHIPS funding for sidewalks.
Yes, but I think that's because no city owns the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I think I see that changing very quickly if we start taking, or as a city start taking ownership. I think,
Across the state though,
yeah,
so
but
that's a systemic change and then a systemic
yeah,
change
but like,
in the New York State budget.
why, if nobody takes the first step, that's never gonna change, and I feel like we
Yeah.
as a citizen also have the right to demand, federal or state level, say,
Yeah.
hey, we need more funding for sidewalks because our city cannot pay it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it is complicated because we made it complicated, but I think we just, we can change it.
Yeah,
And CHIPS funds can be spent on sidewalks, I found, but it has to be part of an overall full right-of-way reconstruction project.
yeah,
And I mean,
we actually did spend it on sidewalks.
yeah, and you have to do it,
Was just.
and you have to do it for your ADA ramps too, if you're doing it, a street. But most municipalities stop the ramps, they don't.
I was gonna say, they only do the ramps and then they don't do anything else, which is silly,
Which is what the city is gonna do with the.
Oh, yeah.
So,
They'll fix the ramps and then when you get there, where do you go?
And quite frankly, that's, I think, a strategy to reduce the city's liability. And I think it's a good strategy because the liability is extreme that the city could potentially face.
I think it does actually make somewhat of a difference. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember when I first moved to Kingston, there were no ramps anywhere, literally. No ADA ramps anywhere that I remember. I mean,
They were ADA compliant.
yeah, there were ADA compliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I remember no ramps.
yeah,
So I remember when they first started putting them in, I was like, wow, that was a big deal. And so it does make a difference.
I don't know,
But
I
not,
just stroller every day, take my kid to
Yeah.
daycare, 15 minutes, and I don't care about the ramp I'm not gonna go through the ramp if the rest of the sidewalk is broken. So, I don't think it makes any difference.
yeah, but if you think about somebody who's in a wheelchair.
But they can't.
It's worse.
Because if you go up the ramp and then the sidewalk is not passable.
Yeah, no, I hear that.
The CHIPS funding, is that, you said it has to be a complete, you used some
A
terminology.
complete right-of-way reconstruction.
So what is that? Yeah,
It would be from
that's
the.
not just the ramp, that's.
A street, it's a full, so figure a street segment from property line to property line
Okay.
is what
So,
it
and
implies. So that- And that is rare, I mean, it just doesn't, the city has relied for years, and many municipalities, on CHIPS funding for paving. It does not, the city, I don't think obligates any of its own tax funding for paving projects. It's 100% CHIPS funding. So if you take away money from that for a sidewalk, that's less linear feet of blacktop that's gonna be put down.
and I think that's a good compromise.
So this city has never dedicated capital funds.
I shouldn't say never, but that's where this.
Well, I'm just, okay, but it hasn't
Pretty
done
sure.
that, to say that this amount of capital money is designated for sidewalks, 500,000, whatever. It's not a line item.
Not to my knowledge.
And Gage Kingston, there is a budget transparency or
For the
something.
new budget tool?
Yeah. You can go into the detail of like DPW and it shows like 10% goes for paving. And it tells you, I think it's like 10% of that is federal money or like of the whole DPW budget. I don't know, those numbers.
Is that the matching fund in order to get the federal money? That's in the DPW line, is that maybe what it is?
It doesn't say even like what it's being used towards, it's just local and federal for whole DPW. And then it just breaks in a different chart, so it doesn't tell you from that where it goes to.
Did you guys get my email about the curb ramps that I sent to John and Emily, and I was still forwarding? It was about the curb ramps.
I did not forward it, I feel like
So
I've seen it shared.
That I think is, you don't mind, I'm just gonna tell you what's in it, because it would inform this conversation a little bit possibly. It's the plans which were not published for the curb ramps. They published them only in the bid documents, which I have access to. So, they show exactly how they're gonna be doing those curb ramps, and they did not take the opportunity to fix curb radii at all. So it's actually going to, make it less possible for us to do that repair in the future, because now we're taking grant money and like solidifying a problematic corners.
Just to point out, this is the tool that Gustavo is referencing, it's actually a really cool, we're getting off topic, so I don't wanna spend too much time on it, but just FYI, there's this really cool budget tool now on the city's website where you can drill down to by department on what, it's these really great charts and graphs. So feel free to dig into that further another time.
This is Engage Kingston,
Some-
if I have through there, okay, thank you.
There's a
So-
lot of data.
So we've got 25 minutes of Kristen's time left remaining.
Well,
Where
yeah,
are we going here?
I guess, it's just, I think we're kind of discussing this idea of having, the, DPW budget include sidewalks, and other infrastructure. And perhaps we need to write down some pros and cons of that idea. I mean, I like the idea. And I just wonder if it's something that's implemented. I guess where I see it as maybe problematic from the other idea of having a sidewalk improvement district is that it's, the DPW budget is subject to the whims of the mayor or the superintendent, right? And so if they don't have that priority of sidewalks or, then they could allocate less money towards it. Whereas if you have a sidewalk improvement district, you have a certain amount every year
So that's,
that is
and
dedicated.
there's an election coming up and that's the sort of thing, the whims of the mayor changes. Those things.
Well, that's, I mean, if we look at the history of Kingston here, there was no stomach for putting money into things people didn't see. You know, the water, the sewer, rest, all of that.
It's
And
very-
there was no stomach for fixing sidewalks. This is relatively new that we're even having these
But this
discussions.
is something you see.
Yeah,
It's right in
but it's
front of
still-
every.
Something new that we're even
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about.
Sure.
So we've come a long ways in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
There also might be a way of combining it with any of these different programs that we look at where, and I think Brian, you were sort of alluding to this, where you could have a sidewalk improvement district fee structure and the DPW
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
could contribute some funding to, so then you have more. And I think also part of the, just to kind of backtrack to CHIPS, that part of the problem with it is that sidewalks are very expensive to reconstruct compared to paving a road.
Right.
Sounds
Sounds like an easy win that they can just sort of look at all these paving projects we're doing. Win, everyone loves it.
Yeah,
Sidewalks.
and everybody hates potholes.
Well, yeah, everybody hates potholes, but then we had that guy from DPW that time, remember, he was kind of spying on us. He was grumbling in the corner about all the ideas we're bringing. And so, yeah, I mean,
Very interesting.
I think that, we did use some CHIPS funding for a sidewalk project when I was here on Cornell Street. So we repaired Cornell, one side of the street on Cornell Street from
Yeah.
Broadway to the end of that Midtown, new Midtown parking lot.
matching funds.
And I think that was like the entire project. I don't know exactly the number, but like the CHIPS funding is, do you know what it is, the allocation each year?
It varies, it's gone up significantly in the
Okay.
past couple of years. It's all published online through New York State.
Is it in like the $1 million range,
It's over.
$800,000?
It's in that range.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's gone up. And then it's not just CHIPS, there's 4 different programs. There's harsh winter paving, POP, pave our potholes, CHIPS, which stands for Highway Improvement Program, City Highway Improvement Program. Then there's your non-state touring route program. So the city receives at least 4 different fund sources for paving.
yeah.
Yeah, routes.
that's like you think of just big old cars and people touring around.
Yeah.
So what about?
So just to say, so that little segment of sidewalk, I think at the time we had like 800.
That's like 2 blocks, it's a good, you know,
It's something.
yeah, it's something.
Something, but compared to miles of.
Right, the miles that we have.
It's a hard
envisioned.
choice for a mayor or DPW superintendent to make when
Every other city,
people are.
you get votes by fixing people's sidewalks.
Yeah.
I would think that they would want to.
They don't want to pay for it.
Some people like potholes too, you slow the traffic.
I wonder if there's 2 pieces to this. One is the funding. And then the other is policy. Can we create some kind of a policy that was basically, I don't know how to phrase this well, but force DPW to expend a
Can
certain
it be part of
percentage or whatever
safety
on
still?
the sidewalk project? And I know there's got to be a better way to say that, but can we help formulate policy that would stick through generations of mayors and DPW bosses and common councils?
Yeah,
With the district theoretically, right? Like if you
Right.
made it that, that's.
It would have to be codified.
yeah,
And there are several other points, proposals in the spreadsheet that would need to be codified. So that would become policy by law.
Codified so the council votes on it.
Yeah, it would be law. That if you're, the point of sale program, which were the 2 points that I added, would mandate whenever a homeowner sells their house, they first have to get an inspection by a building department to prove that their sidewalk meets the code, is ADA compliant. If it's not, they have to repair it before they're issued whatever it is, a certificate of occupancy, is, you know, it's all wrapped up. in the New York State real estate law. It's complicated. I'm not gonna figure out all those details, but if the city wants to move forward, I think it's a great way to move forward. They would have to work with the comptroller's office to figure out how would that program work locally. It's been done elsewhere, particularly in California.
Yeah, I was gonna say, whenever we had a sale, there were certain things that automatically kicked into place. The idea being that when the property's being sold, that there's really enough money to do it. And the one case I remember specifically was backflow prevention.
Right. For tremors. Yeah.
So a con of that I would see is that you don't have the opportunity for the city to recreate a streetscape like we did on Franklin
Right.
Broadway.
Well, the city could still go for grants. And
Yeah.
again, multifaceted. You need a
Right.
variety of tools to solve this problem.
Yeah,
Continue an aggressive grants policy to
right.
do streetscape improvements.
Well, wait, why couldn't you do the whole street? Because then the next sale wouldn't have to worry about it, because theoretically the sidewalk would have been done recently and we didn't get the sign off.
Well, you still could, but if you're fixing the street through that, then it's happening in this like popcorn manner.
Yeah.
Right? So it's happening like whenever somebody sells their
Right.
house, they
And
fix
it's
their
gener-
sidewalk.
It's generational. It would take
Yeah.
a generation for
Yeah.
it to fully do this. So it wouldn't work fast enough. It would be very piecemeal.
Yeah.
That's, again, why it's only one tool in the toolbox.
Right. So, and then also, if you have, let's just say 50% of the street has done it, and 50% of the sidewalks are okay, then maybe that street is less competitive for a grant or for a complete streetscape remake, because it's in relatively good condition.
Right.
You know, if you did a conditions analysis across.
Then
the
it
street.
becomes this whole thing of trying to go down the street in a wheelchair where, it's kind of like going down some of the streets now where your Bluestone's up here, it's new, and then some are just pieces, and you're going down to the next, lot, up next.
But to support what Brian says, it would be one of the tools.
Yeah.
That you would use, because you're not gonna streetscape every street. But, you would be able to start addressing the issue through home sales. Or any kind of property transfer that would trigger it.
Right.
Yeah, or potentially if there is a street, maybe it could be set up, if there is a street that is kind of on the list to be redone from point A to point B, when the homeowner, if the homeowner is not going to repair it when they sell it, maybe that amount, $5,000 could be put into a holding pot for that project.
Yeah, and there's also, I'm getting all this from one article.
Yeah.
It's written by Daniel Shoup, who's a urban planner out of UCLA. He talks about microloans as well, where, even if you're not selling your house, you can get a microloan from the city and use that to fix your sidewalk and pay it out. They would essentially attach a lien to your property. And so you pay back the loan over time, or when you're able to, or if you can't pay it back because you're a low-income homeowner, you sell your house and then the lien gets paid back.
They do that with facade grants and other things, so it's quite possible to do it that way.
So again, it's an administrative burden. So this is where you're dealing with multiple offices. It's not just DPW now.
Yes.
It's a number of offices have to step in and make something like that happen.
Yeah.
But the only way to solve this problem is to make an investment. So I think a wise investment is a multifaceted approach to try to lessen the burden across all city departments and also across all taxpayers. I don't think this problem's gonna get solved by this committee.
No, I think that the goal, we're not really taking notes, but if we can systematically go through, and I think you guys have done a little bit of that and have pros and cons for each of these options. And then we as the committee look at all those and then make a recommendation to the mayor, council, whoever.
Yeah,
say,
maybe we could
this
bring in
is-
our, I guess, did she step down? Brickhill, is that her name?
Oh, no, Barbara hasn't stepped down, but she's not running for reelection,
Oh, okay,
so there's
Right.
two people running for that seat.
okay, so yeah, I guess our sort of our common council.
Right.
Counterpart is kind of in flux or whatever, but yeah, so at that point, we'd probably bring in that person.
Someone will be assigned to complete streets as a liaison.
And maybe it could be a multifaceted approach where we say, where we recommend that there should be money built into the DPW budget, you know, each year, and the sidewalk district, try for it, let's see if the voters will vote for it or not. And some other tools.
Yeah, I also think just a micro loan program and a small grant program, like why not ask Novo Foundation to pony up some money and put it in a lockbox to say every year homeowners can apply for, if they want to do a sidewalk project, if you meet a certain income threshold, you can get a cost share for your sidewalks, if you want to do it yourself. That's not outlined in there, but I mean, that's not a huge leap.
Is what you're describing is almost like a loan that they pay back in and that fund.
A revolving loan.
It could be a revolving loan or just a micro grant.
A one time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do see the administrative burden being a barrier.
Yeah.
Too, so, were there any other?
Could also ask the
ones that you
planning
guys
board
looked
to
at?
require new development to have sidewalks, which is. Can also get your planning board to require new developers to include sidewalks, which was ignored for many decades.
Well, I think that's in the code, the new code
Yeah.
now, right? And
It seems like in the-
shifted.
In the post-war era of the city of Kingston, you can tell, when you go down certain streets that were, post-World War II, they're just lacking sidewalks, when we had a great sidewalk network. It's like, what happened here?
Cars.
Why did they stop?
Cars.
in favors,
Cars.
Yeah, right, correct. So were there any other, programs or policies that you guys looked at that stood out to you?
One that I saw was basically the city, I think it was the 696. Yeah, the city was gonna like set up a schedule, but then like charge people, like the homeowners for the fixes. I think they would do like 50% if you only had one street or something. But yeah, and like the owner could face like civil action if they didn't repair the sidewalk during that time. I don't think that's reasonable or viable. There are better options. The other one.
Looking at the one above, I looked at, it looks like the city charges the homeowners, basically, does the repairs themselves and then just charges the homeowners for the cost, which sounds like a pretty decent idea. You know, if it's the city property, obviously the city just does it, or maybe they can't find out who owns it or whatever, but
That's our existing policy.
that's how it works now. But
Yeah.
the city's not actively,
We never do that, but it has happened.
yeah. I guess if it's, I suppose maybe it's in really bad shape, they would do it
No,
currently. They never do it. Okay.
if there's no political pressure to not do it.
It
Well,
has
there's
happened
political
for
pressure
political
to do it.
reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, to go in and be like, you guys didn't do this, because.
Yeah, or I've seen it happen, not the current mayor, but in the past, where a mayor targeted a specific property owner.
Okay.
And I'm sure like if that happens now before the code is approved, people just gonna do asphalt or something like that.
Well, the code requires concrete in most instances, with the obvious exceptions of the historic area, right?
You're not allowed to use asphalt.
So wait, so
That's our-
that's what exists now.
But there
It's
is,
not enforced.
it's not enforced because it is not politically, I mean,
They'd just be alienating everyone.
yeah, and we didn't do it for 50 years, so why now?
You know,
Right.
You know, why now, why?
you know, I guess I'm still laughing because I do remember as a former public works director, hearing from the deputy chief administrator, like deputy city manager, with the list of sidewalk repairs, and we did. Now, this had to be repaired because of city trees, But I do know that a lot of people were reelected, somebody got sacked. Just an amazed that it doesn't happen here.
The opposite. People don't want your sidewalks touched.
It's
Don't touch my sidewalk, like just the way it is.
thoroughly a mess. Thoroughly.
No.
Well, but that
Well, they
happens
didn't
with
think of
paving.
it until they watched.
Well, but it was joint, it was street, it was sidewalk, but quite frankly, if I was on your street, paving your street, I was probably on there doing some other sidewalk work as well. So it was there, I mean, I had aldermen who basically, if you said you were paving or you were doing the sidewalk on one side of the street, who would actually literally scream, that's not my district, this is my district, you're not doing the sidewalks over here, I don't care about this people. Or there's no house. So it just makes me laugh here when it's like, wow, this is so different.
Yeah,
'Cause,
And it's only been maybe 4 years since phase one of this task force that we had that requirement of concrete or bluestone in this.
So then it would just be what?
Yeah, you see.
People put in whatever they wanted, you know, blacktop. There's a few, that were done
And,
not that long ago with cobbles. You know,
I mean, initially, blacktop is, well, it's better than nothing, it doesn't last. That's the problem with blacktop, and it gets worse
Yeah.
than anything.
Trees are coming up early.
weeds, trees.
so, yeah, that's
Yeah,
our
so that's-
existing policy, but I don't think it's working. So, I don't know, were there any others that you guys have?
Can I ask, this, because that's not online, I haven't seen it, I can't see that far away. Is the penny tax on there?
Penny tax?
Mm.
No. I don't know. Is it on there?
I know that
I
has been
would-
shared.
What is that, just rounding?
It's
Up
a
or
penny
something?
on every sale, so it would have to be, figured out how to do it for just city sales. I know that there's a county and city tax agreement every year, so it would be some figuring out how to do it. It's been very successful in many places where no matter what the size of the sale is, whether you're buying a car or you're buying a candy bar, it's 1 penny added to the sale. And those pennies all go so every sale gives the city a penny that's dedicated specifically to sidewalk work.
Oh, interesting. Will you share, do you have some links or something that you can share with us?
I think Michael Kudranski shared it with you guys in an email. I could ask him to resend it.
Would that need to be approved by the New York State Legislature? I think it would, but it's not insurmountable.
Should the New York State Legislature just for a local
I think
city
so,
tax?
a new tax, yeah, I think so. I'm out of my
Yeah,
area of expertise, I don't know for sure.
based on what I recall, local history of sales taxes, I'm pretty sure that that's the thrill legislature.
so for next steps, perhaps what we can do is continue working on this document. And kind of fill in some of the pros and cons and maybe more of us can weigh in.
Did you add some
And-
columns?
I did, I just worked with the columns that were in there, I didn't spend a great amount of time, but I did want to get the point of sale and micro loan points added to it. I think the penny tax is another great idea. And then I think what we do here, is we provide some sort of narrative to introduce the issue, and if we have some sort of consensus, which I feel like we're working toward one here, that the city needs to devote some resources to solve this problem. But in order to support, since we don't wanna, break the budget, I understand that for elected officials, these are difficult decisions. But maybe there are a multiple number of tools that can be used here. We could perhaps prioritize them.
Yeah, I don't think we can solve it with just what's allocated to DPW without increasing taxes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Could we also maybe just as part of the process, if you go in and work on something, send an email, like we have a lot of email threads and sometimes it's, whatever, ideas, thoughts, great stuff, but just maybe it's just only particular to me, but to like remember to keep on task with this. Perhaps say, hey, I worked on the Google Doc, here's the link. And then then that might inspire more of us to go in and look at what you just did and, just kind of like sort of storing the conversation in the Google Doc rather than in the emails,
Mhm.
the different ideas.
I actually remember that line 7, I think it's also the city using their funds. It doesn't say where they're coming from, just using like city funds. But they do define regions. And I think they probably, I think they also assign like years for like the region, like priorities, so they're like selecting the priorities for each region. I think something like that can go with like the districts or, go through different mayors if possible, if that gets defined that way.
Do we have, is it the pedestrian bike master plan that grade the sidewalks? Yes.
Yeah, that was done with the MPO set the basic standard and then city staff took that and improved upon it. It's rather coarse.
It's also old now, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah, sidewalks don't change very rapidly. We'll have to update it with the ADA improvements occurring this summer. But we did block by block segments and rated the accessibility, the ADA accessibility on those large lengths. So you could have several properties in succession that are in perfect condition,
Right.
and then one in horrible condition. You're gonna get, that whole block is gonna get very poor.
Okay.
Rightfully so, because you can't traverse it if you're limited. But it's something to be aware of. It's just a sort of a shortcoming of the process.
I'm just curious, Brian, are other towns and municipalities in Ulster County talking about this?
No, not to this length or depth that I'm aware of. I mean,
It's not an
Saugerties,
issue only in.
no, I mean, Saugerties has always, Alex Wade, our buddy, he's always, he's taken on some pretty big sidewalk projects.
I looked at
Oh,
Saugerties,
yeah.
there's an article on Saugerties. It kind of focused more on their historic downtown of the Bluestone.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're talking about. I mean, there are other sidewalk projects going on. I think they all recognize that sidewalk networks, it's an issue, it's an expense, but no one is looking to solve the problem to this depth that the city, that this committee has taken. I should also mention, it's almost a tangent, but the New York State DOT will be getting to update its non-motorized plan. It's the first iteration that it's written. It wrote a statewide bike ped master plan last in 2009, I want to say. So this is the first update. It's now being called a non-motorized plan. And I had an opportunity to speak to the project manager a few weeks ago. I said, we really need to speak to sidewalks in this plan because it's sort of like the first mile, last mile point. We talked about, we've done a great job with rail trails in Ulster County and other non-motorized linear paths, but how do you get there from your front door? If you don't have good sidewalks, and it's, as we know after this conversation, it's a missing part of the puzzle in terms of funding and policy, so.
Well, I think that this comes back to the notion that Chris from planning talked about for a long time. We built the spine, we've got these trails, and now we need the ways to get people there.
Yeah.
So, we're at that point now in Kingston where we need to get the people there.
And while it's really wonderful that we've got the trails and they're recreational, my concern is people can't walk to work safely.
Well,
They can't walk to the doctor. I get frustrated only
that's not
because.
entirely true because some of these trail projects were designed and funded with transportation in mind. It wasn't just a recreational trail.
And I understand
The
that,
Empire State Trail on 32,
but
that was,
to me, I'm still more concerned about how people get around in their day-to-day. I need to get to work, I need to get here, and if you tell them, for many of them, if you say, use the trail, So what they understand is the sidewalk. Now, maybe there will be people.
Well,
who-
32 project is a perfect example of that. Empire State Trail is coming in. The city had to come up with the money for the sidewalk. I'm simplifying this. But now we've got a sidewalk that'll get you up to the Institute for Family Health, it'll get you up to Gateway. Where before that,
There was.
you would see women pushing strollers, dragging toddlers up in the storm gutter on 32. So, you know, we do have some benefits of these trails in terms of transportation. And that never would have happened.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you should add that to that list of projects on that executive order.
And
That was a big one,
And the linear-
actually. That was a big deal.
That was, yeah, we found that project in Grandma's attic, we called it.
Yeah.
So,
It's nice that they can get there, but like I said, my emphasis is
Yeah.
more pedestrian. My emphasis is, can you walk to work? Can you get there? Because you don't always have a bike and you don't.
And the
always
linear
have-
park is
Yeah.
certainly a transportation corridor. Tremendous number
Some
of
people
people.
walking on that.
Yeah.
When I bike on the ground.
And you see them carrying bags from Hannaford and so forth.
And the way that's just sort of exactly Paulette's point, like,
But
I'm sorry, Paulette, like, you got, why don't you walk, hoof it a long way to go to the middle of a giant parking lot instead of fixing side streets and make them that same money and supporting stores right there.
Sorry, all,
Oh,
but childcare came.
Well, thank you for your,
But, yeah. Okay, thanks, so we'll just keep communicating with Lula and I don't know if that's works in 2 months. Maybe it'll be a little more organized.
well, who knows, maybe it'll pop up in next month's agenda.
All right, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Now, what are we doing for time? 5:00. Keep going here, or should we jump back to the other issue?
The executive order.
Yeah,
I wonder if that executive order can be a point to kind of like pressure to on fixing sidewalks.
Can we, yeah, I kind of almost joked about that before, but can we bring it back up and possibly think about adding language to that? Or maybe sort of subtly hinting that we mean sidewalks or something that can then be brought up later? I don't know. I
We
mean,
can add a goal statement that says something to the effect of declare that City of Kingston is devoted to improving its sidewalks.
pedestrian safety, you know,
That's perfectly reasonable.
yeah.
I don't wanna overload this proclamation, if that is that what it's called? Executive order, with too many it's superfluous items, you know, making it turn into a wish list, because the purpose is to make it compliant for a specific grant that the city wants to apply for under a deadline, so. And, I mean, we're just gonna make recommendations ultimately.
I'm not the best writer here, but I'll make a note of it and then.
And we can throw some ideas around or.
has the city ever bonded for paving?
I mean, it's fine for projects, to help pay for the matches for projects and, first instance payments for projects. It certainly does, and it gets reimbursed on the back end.
But it's never specifically had like a bond measure for.
No, good question. Not to my knowledge since I've been here. I don't recall.
To, back to answer you, I would recommend that if you were going to do a more in-depth policy, like what I think you're building for the sidewalks, that would be, that's something that the common council should vote on. That should not be an executive order. It, you know, it should be something that the city buys in on that method.
Okay.
It'll have more, you know, an executive order, while wonderful, it does show that the current mayor supports things and you can reference that in advocacy letters. You know, what we really want is more actionable policy that has teeth to it, that makes departments do things.
Yeah.
So, you know, an executive order can do that, but I'm not a policy expert, but I would recommend that you do a true like a true law or policy.
It's actually something that occurred to me with the Google Doc. I wonder if we should somehow parse out what part of this is policy, what part of this is funding. I think that might help. The synthesis
Like policy versus what?
funding. I mean,
Okay, yeah, I
in
guess.
real simple terms, you know, this is a policy thing, part of it, this is, you know, where's the money coming from, part of it. I think sometimes we kind of commingle those two thoughts without identifying it as policy versus
And
where's the money really coming.
at one point when we were doing the sidewalk fee proposal, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever it was, we
Before.
sat down with someone from real estate and finance to talk us through how this would actually function. His name escapes me, it's in this building.
Oh, do you mean Tui, the?
It wasn't John Tui, it may have been one of his staff.
Okay,
But they walked us through how the real property system works
oh,
and how this could potentially integrate into the real property system. And so this is, you know, when we did the fee district, it was a different ask than what this is. The mayor's asked us to come up with ideas. So we don't have to get into the weeds, and I suggest we don't, or we'll never get done. Whereas, when the fee district was proposed, I think the mayor asked Kristen Wilson, who was staff at the time, to solve that problem and come up with a solution. So it was at a much finer grained level. That's my recollection. So.
So, something else we can look at. Yeah,
is this what you want?
yeah, go back up to the top. I did a speed read on this the first time, with the time constraints. But are you ready? We can scroll down.
Kingston will promote a network of sidewalks that are safe and accessible throughout the city of Kingston, something to that effect.
We'll promote a network of sidewalks that is safe, is that what you're saying?
That are safe and accessible throughout.
My spine's also atrocious. So You'll see that.
It's just your type.
Is there anything in here about prioritizing vulnerable road users?
Uses it in actual.
The Safe Systems approach
Yeah.
does specifically mention vulnerable users as part of its,
It's
it's got a 6-point approach. Vulnerable road users are one of the points, I believe. And yeah, I see it under declare, the second declare, and to facilitate safe travel by the most vulnerable users. So it's.
But what about prioritizing
It's
them?
mentioned.
I keep coming back to the issues around the schools. I keep looking for the word schools in here somewhere. School transportation. I don't know if that can be fit into this, or does this fall into that vulnerable user bucket?
Do you wanna dig into that a little bit deeper, what you mean, like, you could say something like, declare that Kingston,
No, I'm thinking about
School
the
that
school
has.
zones, speed limits, the
Okay.
signage. Right now, we've got kind of a mishmash. Maybe there's a reduced speed limit. The one near the Bailey School is 10 miles an hour, which is
Illegal.
You can't hardly idle at 10
You
miles
can't,
an hour.
drive 10 miles an hour.
It's not legal.
Yeah.
New York State DMT.
And there's no,
You can't.
and it's not uniform. There's one sign on one street. Nowhere else around those two schools, that's in the Bailey, is there a school speed limit.
So you want to promote uniformity?
That's
Something
exactly
that
where I was going with it.
I've always loved that one consultant that was brought to make signage consistent throughout the whole entire city. But I don't know if you want to loop that into, you're thinking more about schools, so I'm thinking about another sort of.
Yeah, I keep thinking about the schools because I see what's happening here and, talking about impacts of policies. There's this no mow thing with, state DOT, DEP, not mowing the grass. Well, on Quarry Street, state DOT has not mowed the grass along the road frontage.
I put in 311 up at Pine Grove because that grass has gotten so high you can't see.
Well, the kids use that grass as the sidewalk because there's no sidewalk. So now they're walking in the street because the grass comes up to their armpit.
Well, would it be this paragraph towards the top here, the one that says Kingston will encourage safe, responsible driving, now, sorry, it's not, I mean, on the top of this screen currently. We'll encourage safe, responsible driving further down to facilitate safe travel by the most vulnerable users. Could you then just add, with the focus around,
I
city
keep coming
schools or
back to
something
the
like that?
uniformity thing, which is why I thought maybe we need another declare where uniformity around
Our same focus.
schools in terms of speed limits, signage.
Well, could you just expand that to be a uniformity throughout the city in terms of messaging around, road safety? 'Cause
Well,
there
we
is
could, but I
consistency
think
there.
the schools are kind of a priority thing. Because the kids are the vulnerable ones. They're not, if they're walking, they're extremely vulnerable. I don't see any kids riding bicycles to those schools because of
No.
the parents. I mean, it's like a demolition derby out there, only they're not quite making contact. It's crazy how many cars try to get to those schools.
How about instead of the focus around schools and in a uniform and equitable fashion? I don't know if that really gets down to the level,
Equitable covers prioritizing vulnerable users.
right? And equity is an important component
Yeah.
of the approach as well. I'm not sure if it's.
A uniform and equitable approach.
This is kind of like a side note, but one issue that I see with the school speed limits is that the school is the one that has to request it instead of like the city being proactive about it. Our daughter goes to the YWCA and I ask them like, hey, can you request this? And they just totally ignore me. So it's like,
Right,
that doesn't.
right.
Well, the public schools, I think that wouldn't be that big of a deal to go to the school board and say, we would like you to, adopt.
Establish a school zone. I mean,
Yeah.
because that is a specific part of the New York City VTL, the establishment of a school zone. We have one on Washington Avenue.
Yeah.
I'm
And
not
even
sure where else the school zones are established, so you
So then you want to promote and establish school zones throughout the city of Kingston?
How are there not?
Around all the schools.
around all schools, I mean, if they're not consistent, then they're not uniform, so if, maybe that's what you want
And
to
there's
do.
no end to schools.
Right, but I mean,
So-
just, point of order, I mean, I see your point, John, and I agree with you, but, I mean, do we have a deadline that we're setting for ourselves here on this proclamation?
I'd like to
Everyone?
send it to the mayor next week.
Okay, so I think we should try to focus as much as we can on the purpose of this proclamation, which is to, again, make the city compliant so it can apply for a grant, rather than adding everything in our wish list.
So I'm getting back to the
Yeah,
point.
sidewalks.
We just really want to get this grant. And if we want to get this grant, we gotta hold off on putting everything in here and just focus on what we need to get this.
So wait, what,
Is that,
what is the list for the
That's what I
grant?
is that, okay.
Is it already?
So it's for the Safe Streets for All grant. The city is working on that application. I don't know if the final project has been defined or not. The city was still, when we met last week, we were still deciding which project to go for. But it would be a pedestrian and cycle, I don't know if the right language, Brian, you can help me out, supported project. It would be a project to support walking. Is that the right language?
Right, yes, yeah, the city met also with my office, and we provided some insight into areas and data that might support an application, what specific locations within the city and what specific projects might fit the mold for the Safe Streets for All application. So we narrowed it down to like 2 or 3 projects that I thought were feasible. One of them being the Foxhall Flatbush project, which is well short of all the necessary funds it needs. It's an existing grant, but it's well short.
And Ben's been doing nothing now for well over, since.
I think they're in the right of way phase, acquisition phase, so. it takes time.
Is there any update on the federal funding for, Roundout Strand, or what Strand, the Strand, that we're waiting on, I think it was mid-June, wasn't it supposed to?
Is that the raise grant?
Yeah, maybe.
Can we close this
Sure,
item
sure,
maybe before we talk about other items? Because I feel like we're just sort of spinning our wheels.
How
And
competitive is this grant?
this is the second round of the Safe Streets for All grant that the US DOT has issued. The first round, there was money left on the table. So, it's very well funded for planning grants and for implementation grants. I think the city has a very good shot, if we can,
I'm up with the right
check
shot.
the box this year.
Is there guidance from the government on?
Yeah.
Did you send that around too? Did you, or
I
just?
didn't send that around.
I can forward it.
Okay, just so we know.
It's called a NOFO, a Notice of Funding Opportunity.
Okay,
It's about, 45 pages long. And it's the grant application.
all right.
But it does talk about the parameters. It is, government speak, I'll warn you. You'll get lost in the details, very quickly. It's possible to anyway. But I can certainly forward
That'd
it.
be interesting to look, right, just to sort of see what it's like.
Gotta look into our world of
Yeah.
Get ready for like today.
grant.
It's the same,
So, I mean, we all, if I may, John, I mean, we all have this draft proclamation. These are great ideas. I think if we take a few more days, we have a deadline of a week to think about it, maybe make an internal deadline of Friday, close of business. That members provide further recommendations and revisions and additions. And if, I think we'll reach consensus pretty quickly unless somebody throws in something really crazy. And we can just forward the recommendations that may or may not accept any of them at the end of the day. So
That's true.
we'll
That's
need to
something we can
spend.
put in a Google Doc that we can,
Would you prefer that, a Google Doc, so you can see each other's comments?
Yeah. it might be easier to reconcile. Hopefully there's overlap.
I also just want to put out that this council could recommend other policy like this. So, just because there's an opportunity right now to sort of pushing the mayor to do this, you all could draft an executive order for the mayor at other times that for him to consider. So I just,
Proposed executive.
thank you. And so I just want to say that like this isn't your only opportunity for this.
You have to squeeze all your.
Or is it consideration?
For instance. Yep. Oh, but I feel like I've said this to this council before, your role is advisor
It's advisory.
for the council, and you can always draft legislation for them to consider at any time. That can be part of your role. You can also just educate. So I think I've shared with John, the Lidwell Kingston Commission, which is the other commission that I actually facilitate that commission. They have done letters of education recently about food systems, and they have sent that to the council and gotten responses from at least one of the council members. So that's another role you could take, is you could write up, letters of education or letters of support or just letters of recommendation. Some ideas there for you. Thank you, everyone, for that. I do recognize that it's the urgency in it, and I'm just trying to facilitate these different projects. I appreciate your attention on that.
Thank you.
I guess there were only 2 agenda items we had.
Yeah. And the next meeting is July 12th, and that'll be a complete streets. And John, as I've mentioned over email, there's a lot of things for that agenda. So I'm gonna send you all the things I collected, and you should decide what you want to try to fit in one meeting.
All right,
What are the things? I got the sense of
what?
things were calming down a little bit.
No,
So we have a new applicant to the board. There's that one. Hold on a second while I open up my little cheat sheet here. We create to do. All right, we talked about crash data, so we talked about that when Brian wasn't here, but in case Brian wanted to talk to any of the crash data, that was sort of tentative on the agenda. We talked about setting priorities for the council. We talked about creating feedback specifically about the Broadway project.
Right.
We talked about 311 categories. We talked about letter of support process. So we submitted a letter on behalf of the council, but this council might want to consider a formal process for that. So for example, with Kingston, we have passed the resolution that between the chair and myself, if one of us wants to recommend to the chair of the Kingston that a letter of support be written, it just takes the chair's decision on whether or not that exists, because letters of support are often needed so quickly for grants. Like, for example, so we don't have to wait a full month to get a letter of support, but you don't have that process in place for complete streets. So you might want to consider that process. Rose Quinn has requested to do a presentation on safe systems, and this isn't agenda, but Lieutenant Osterhout wanted to have him be on the invites for those meetings.
said that he would like to attend the meetings when he's available.
Yeah, and that was the general complete streets meetings, right, not the sidewalks.
I would send him on all,
Okay,
see what he shows up for,
okay, great.
because I think he could be a real good ally. They were supposedly moving into more of an enforcement mode
Yeah, like
versus education mode, and it'd be good to hear from him,
we haven't heard an update.
what the
from
outcomes are of that.
KPD in a minute, or about the bike, how the bike ops are doing and all that stuff.
And he can also help inform on what might be queryable from I call it the blotter. They get some other activity reports that they have.
We did have, I remember we got, I think you sent around that we could look at those.
Because I don't know if, like, when it comes to crashes, does everything that KPD respond to generate a report that gets sent to the state? Because I'm thinking about like single bicycle crashes where that wouldn't end up there, I don't think.
There's a form called the NV104C, I think it is, and if if a cyclist crashes into another cyclist or into a fixed object, they need to fill that out themselves voluntarily. I don't know the details.
What I'm thinking about is just in the vicinity of my home, there's a hill. And since I've been there, 3 kids have crashed on bicycles, 2 were transported. I think both of them were unconscious, after the crash. And there was another kid that crashed and I picked his front teeth up, put him in a jar and handed him to his mother. I mean, these kinds of crashes are out there and this is a, kind of an infrastructure or potentially infrastructure cause behind this or contributing factor behind it. But that's not going to appear in these reports. And I'm wondering and the police responded to those. I'm wondering if we might be able to get that kind of crash data from the activity reports, if that's queryable. This is something I wanted to talk to Ernie Osterhout about, because that would help inform things. And that goes back to the, the discussions we had about they bucket that in, the bike share, where they try to regulate behaviors of the riders. Is a fatality the right measure, or are crashes because somebody was, doing something stupid?
Yeah, but fatalities are not typically the single data point that we look at for considering systematic mitigation of crashes.
Yeah.
Fatalities are generally random.
And these, these single bicycle crashes that I've seen, I don't think they made a formal report anywhere. When the police were there, it was more for traffic control because there was ambulance and the fire department, blocking up the streets. And, I'm just thinking about how we can get the richest data so that we know what we're talking about. Because I've got all this anecdotal stuff because I was a witness. But is that quantified anywhere? I don't know if it is.
Yeah. I would recommend if you want to put crash data analysis on the agenda for whatever future meeting, that we invite David Stotts from my office, that's his area of specialization.
Yeah, Dave and
he is
Ernie, between the two of them, we might get a good idea of what's available.
Yeah, we've talked about this at length at the Ulster County Traffic Safety Board. And David is going to be engaging. I mean, we did a systemic countywide crash data analysis that we completed around 2021 that looked at 10 years of crash data of automobile, bike, and pedestrian. Normalized it based on traffic volumes. It was a big step forward for our office. And we're going to be updating that on a regular basis going forward. So it's very much using a data-driven approach to try to target areas where there might be excessive crashes occurring beyond what we would consider to be the norm for roadway design. The problem with bike ped is we can't normalize the data because we don't have a lot of volume information on the volume of bicyclists and pedestrians using our roadways. That data just is not collected typically. We're starting to collect some.
And I was even wondering if there was a way to get, I forgot the term, data from the emergency room admissions that is just counts without any identifiable
Yeah.
information.
And isn't that delivered to the CDC on an annual basis? Like you can look up like how many times people go to the ER for any variety of things. And it's
Like
it's
they
all,
run their hand through a mandolin, they track that.
yeah, exactly. So,
So, I wonder if we've got a way to tap into that, because I think there's a whole bunch of data sitting there that could help inform. And I don't know, how finely that's sliced and diced. Because if it's just
Right.
at the hospital level, we don't know where they lived.
Yeah.
You know, we
Say
have,
Lander County.
yeah.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that pop in my head. To help us come up with real numbers that we can base decisions on. Or recommendations is probably a better way to put it. Theoretically, we don't make any decisions here. We make recommendations.
I will also have to leave in a few minutes.
Okay, yeah, I think we're basically done. So 5:30.
So I did forward the Safe Streets for All link. It was on the tail end of the conversation with Gustavo, the last email that was sent. So it should be in everyone's inbox. And it's just the link to the main landing page, and you can find the notice of funding opportunity. There's a lot of interesting information on that program.
I did not see that email yet, the time reference with the
Penny tax,
curb ramps.
curb ramps.
training,
But yeah, you can pass that around.
That's for you to decide to do, John.
Oh, you want me to pass it around?
Uh-huh.
All right.
I'm not gonna decide which public, community members' information to pass on to communities. That should be.
Sure.
Can I ask a question about that? Shouldn't there be a policy for the board that anytime a public member sends in a comment to share with the board that they request gets forwarded to the board, it just gets forwarded? I mean, why would it ever not just get forwarded? If somebody in the public wants to pass on some information, what would be the reason about to not just forward it?
What if it's misinformation?
Or just people being horrible. I mean, there's,
I get lots of.
Or not.
yeah,
We're not relevant.
I can think of a lot of reasons.
Yeah, which is why we have a chair. And I think the chair is perfectly capable of determining what's appropriate.
And the thing that
Is that,
concerns me somewhat about that is we can't do anything about that. That was something that I assume the city engineer handled that whole thing. We had no input whatsoever on that.
What do you
I hadn't heard about it at all.
Until
yeah, that's why I share it with you, so that you guys know, because that's part of your job is to inform on those specific kinds of
you would
things.
think we would have known about that.
Right.
It wasn't until after the fact that we found out
What,
about
what are you talking?
the ADA ramps on the intersections.
But it's not in this council's role to give engineering feedback.
Yeah,
You can give recommendations, or
What do you mean,
Yeah.
what's the difference between recommendations and engineering feedback?
it's not part of the engineering process that it comes to the Complete Streets Advisory Council for approval.
Right, so I mean, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, though. An issue that is problematic, or that the public finds to be problematic, that they would like the committee to, and as council to, be aware of, because there are silos in the city, in terms of these projects, particularly the time-constrained grant-funded projects where it's basically a policy to limit the public engagement. But there are things that become very problematic. I mean, well, for instance, another example is something else I sent to you guys is the, I don't think I specifically asked you to share it, but I shared it with John and Barbara Hill and the uptown transportation plan. On Engage Kingston, the plans that are still up there don't let the public know that they are eliminating crosswalks across Clinton. So at John's,
Consolidating, aren't they?
no, they are eliminating the ability
well, that's,
I
to.
use the term consolidate.
Okay, well, okay, no, not consult, well, you'd have to walk a block out of your way on either direction to be able to cross the street. You know where Delgado's office was, and the Repco building and the new location of Uptown Coffee, that intersection? There's crosswalk to go across Clinton currently. This project eliminates that
Yeah.
crossing.
but they're adding in controlled crossings at the end of Westbrook and John.
Yeah, you're asking pedestrians to go out of their way to
But where's
cross
the
the street. Isn't
pedestrians
that-
coming from? They're coming up from the plaza.
There's a multi-unit building right there where there are at least 6 units right there.
So is
There are
it safe,
offices, there are the exits to, there's the key place, there's the coffee
where's the
shop.
safe place to cross at the controlled intersection with the pedestrian crossing?
At the stop sign.
Or
At the stop sign.
mid-block? The stop sign's going away though, as far as I know.
So there's another example though of, you're prioritizing vehicles. And there is a project, the Uptown
Well,
project is prioritizing vehicles. They did not let the public know about it, the only time that we had a chance to
There were
look at it.
public meetings on that project.
But they did not let the public know about that specific issue. In fact, they have a misleading diagram up even still on the Engage Kingston site that shows a crosswalk across, a painted crosswalk right there. It was only in the construction plans that were only on BidNet Direct where it could be discovered that they have eliminated the ability to cross with a painted crosswalk right there. They're taking out the stop sign, they're prioritizing traffic, and this was not part of the public process. In fact, it was like the public was misled with that. So those kind of things I think are really important that you guys know.
But I did know about that from the public meetings that happened, what was that, a year, 2 years ago?
No, they were not talking about that, the public meeting, taking that out. They
And how
definitely
did
did.
I find out about it? I knew about it.
Well, you find out about lots of things that the rest of us don't find out about.
I found out about it at a public meeting.
Yeah, I have to go, I have to stop the streaming, so can we, you can keep talking.
There, yeah, we can adjourn.
In the next comment of the next meeting, I'm gonna include like, what is the process for including the public and letting the public tip you off on things that are really important that you guys should be addressing. That it's really your responsibility because you're a board, you're our Complete Streets, we are relying on you guys to address this specific kind of thing.
That sounds reasonable.
I think the process can be correct, for sure.
Well, maybe there's a process change that's needed at the city level too then. Because if something like this was handled by engineering, we didn't know about it until after the fact. There's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
You know, it goes out as a bid document, and that's the first time we see what the plan looks like.
So, shall we adjourn? I'm interested in continuing the discussion. Should we adjourn to free others?